You were hurt. And not just in a way that you could shake off after a few days. Not the kind of hurt you can patch up with a night out or a few comforting words from friends. No, you were cracked open. Split wide, raw, and exposed. You trusted when it wasn't easy. You believed in people, in dreams, in yourself, even when the odds weren't exactly stacked in your favor. You tried, really tried, with everything you had. You gave pieces of yourself to something bigger, expecting at least a little kindness in return. And somehow, after all that, it still wasn't enough. Maybe it was betrayal, that moment you never saw coming, when the hand you thought would lift you instead pushed you under. Or maybe it was more subtle, like the slow, quiet erosion of a dream you poured your life into. You didn't even notice it happening at first. Just a missed opportunity here, a broken promise there, until one day you woke up and realized you were standing in the ruins of everything you once hoped for. Or maybe it was something harder to explain. A slow ache, deep down, a sense that no matter what you did, it was never going to be enough. That you would always somehow end up second best, forgotten, invisible. And so, you did what any human heart would do. You picked up the pieces. You started building walls. You patched together armor from every broken shard. You wrapped your pain around yourself like a badge of honor, because at least if it meant something, it wasn't for nothing. You survived. That alone deserves recognition. But there's a strange thing about pain. It can trick you. It can whisper stories in your ear, stories that feel so comforting you don't even realize they're traps. Stories where you're always the one who was wronged, always the one who deserved better, and never, not even once, the one who holds the pen and chooses what happens next. This is the hidden psychology of victimhood, and it's why clinging to the victim identity can feel safer than healing. It sounds backward, doesn't it? After all, who would want to stay in pain? Who would willingly choose to wear their wounds like a second skin? But the truth is, the mind isn't built just for thriving. It's built, first and foremost, for surviving. And sometimes, survival means convincing yourself that staying small, staying hurt, staying behind your fortress walls, is safer than risking the possibility of being hurt all over again. Imagine it for a second. Really, imagine it. Picture the world in the year 1562. The forests of Europe stretch out endlessly, misty and gray, with tiny villages clinging to the edges of civilization like tiny flickering candles in an endless dark. And in those villages, fear. Not of monsters, not of wolves, though there were those too, but of something even more dangerous, each other. Women who were different, women who knew the secrets of plants and stars, were accused of witchcraft. Trials were swift, guilt was assumed. Innocence was a luxury no one could afford to believe in. But here's the part they don't teach you in school. It wasn't just that people truly believed every woman accused was a witch. It was that agreeing with the accusations, participating in the outrage was safer. It was safer to point the finger than to risk standing out. Safer to belong to the angry mob than to question it and become its next target. Belonging was survival. Safety, even if it meant betraying truth, even if it meant destroying others. That ancient instinct, it still lives in us today. When you've been wounded, when the people you trusted hurt you, when the world you thought was safe turns dangerous, it's tempting to build an identity around that pain. Tempting to say, I am the broken one. Tempting to think, at least if I am broken, no one will expect anything from me. Because if you stay the victim, if you make your identity revolve around the wound, you never have to risk again. Not love, not hope, not effort, not faith. The victim identity becomes a castle. High walls, iron gates, moats so deep that even the strongest swimmer would drown before reaching you. But castles, left alone for too long, don't stay castles. They become prisons. There's a forgotten story from ancient Greece that captures this perfectly. The story of Philoctetes. You probably never heard it, not unless you dug deep into dusty old mythology books. Philoctetes was a warrior, brave, skilled, hand-picked by Heracles himself, gifted a bow, said to never miss its mark. But during the Trojan War, tragedy struck. A venomous snake bit his foot, and the wound refused to heal. It festered. It reeked. It was so unbearable that his fellow soldiers, disgusted by the smell and the sight of him, abandoned him alone on a desolate island. For 10 years, Philoctetes lived with his wound. 10 years with no friends, no comfort, no healing. 10 years where the pain wasn't just something he had, it was who he became. When the Greeks realized they desperately needed him, that without Philoctetes and his magic bow, they couldn't win the war, they returned. They begged him to come back. But by then, Philoctetes wasn't just a man with a wound. He was the wound. He clung to his bitterness like it was the only thing that kept him breathing. Because healing, real healing, would mean giving up the one thing he still had left, the righteous anger, the sense of being wronged, the story where he was the abandoned, the betrayed, the justified. And that's the secret no one ever tells you. Healing is terrifying, because healing demands that you give up your old story. Healing asks you to step into a world where you can no longer say, "This happened to me, therefore I can't." Healing demands courage, and not the loud, flashy kind. Healing demands quiet, relentless bravery. It demands you risk being hurt again, that you risk failing, that you risk living. That's why clinging to the victim identity can feel safer than healing. Because if you let go of being the broken one, there are no more excuses left. There is only the blank page, the open road, the unknown. And that is a much scarier monster than any pain you already know by heart. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, a man who began life as a slave in the 1st century, understood this better than most. He once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Simple words, but brutal. They strip you of the luxury of blame. They tear down the castle walls you built around yourself. They leave you alone with nothing but the raw, trembling truth. You are free to choose what happens next. Always. Even when you were betrayed. Even when you were shattered. Even when the world you trusted caved in on itself. You can choose. Think about your own life. I mean, really think about it. Where are the places where the wound still speaks louder than your will? Maybe it's the way you hold back in relationships, never letting anyone all the way in. Maybe it's the career you gave up on, because one failure convinced you weren't good enough. Maybe it's the quiet way you self-sabotage every time you get close to something you actually want, whispering to yourself, "What's the point?" It's easier to stay in the story where you are powerless. Easier to say, "Well, they hurt me, and that's why I can't." Easier to say, "Life's unfair," and leave it there. And maybe it is unfair. Maybe the people who hurt you really were wrong. Maybe the dreams that died really were beautiful and deserved better. But none of that changes the fact that you're still here, breathing, choosing, and in that choice is your entire future. Freedom is terrifying because it means you have no one left to blame, no one left to hide behind. It's just you, and the life you decide to build from here. One man I knew carried a betrayal for 25 years. 25 years of bitterness. 25 years of closed-off friendships, failed marriages, lonely holidays spent replaying the same old hurt. Until one day, standing at the grave of the man who betrayed him, staring down at a stone that would never speak, never apologize, he realized something. The only person still suffering was himself. The man he hated was gone. Dust. Forgotten by everyone except him. He was the one still locked inside a cage that had long since lost its key. That day, he made a choice. Not because the betrayal suddenly became okay, not because forgetting made it hurt less, but because he was finally tired of living like a ghost. He chose to lay the story down. He chose life over loyalty to the wound. And so can you. If this speaks to you, wait till you hear what he said next time. Because when he chose to let go, it didn't just free him, it changed everything. The way he loved, the way he worked, the way he woke up in the morning and saw the sunrise not as a threat, but as a promise. You are not your wound. You are what you choose to build after it. And the most powerful thing you will ever do is dare to write a new story.